Well, great, guys. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to JOC Huddle number 17. Today, we're going to be talking about permitting JOC projects. Today's Friday, April 29th, and I am Jeremy Gummeljek, System-Wide Construction Manager at the Chancellor's Office. Let's take a quick look at our agenda. So doing welcome and housekeeping right now. To permit or not to permit, we're going to talk about CSU policy stat. Work that is exempt from permits, required plan reviews. We'll talk about the JOC general conditions. We'll talk to Mike Major at Office of Fire Safety. And at the end, we will have questions and answers. But for now, I'd like to introduce our special guest for today. Ebby, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning. I'm Ebby Severi, the special guest for this morning.
Well, it's Ebby and Mike. Are you on the line yet, Mike Major? I think maybe he might join us hopefully a little bit later, or I'm sure we can cover his slides. So let's get it started, guys. And what is needed for a permit and what is not needed? Well, these guys look like they're painting, right? So what do you guys think? Permit or no permit?
No permit.
No permit, right. Painting is fine. Although this guy's kind of getting high on the rung of the ladder. Maybe it's not so safe. How about this, though? What do you guys think? Permit
Depends.
or no permit? What's that?
Depends.
It depends.
Depends on what was there before.
Exactly.
Is it like kind replacement, or does it change the elevation and interfere with the threshold?
And the grading, good.
Yeah.
Good one, Ed. Thanks so much. But permit is definitely needed for this kind of work. Does anybody know what this used to be before demolition?
No.
A building.
Great job.
Station.
Oh, nice. Who said that? John, great work. That used to be Grand Central Station. So actually, I went to NYU to study permitting. And this was actually a big topic of discussion because the demolition permit was allowed. A lot of folks protested the demolition of the original Penn Station. But what was set up after the demolition, because New York City realized what they had done, is they actually set up a preservation society to protect historic buildings from being demolished, much like Penn Station. So it was actually more beautiful than Grand Central Penn Station was. So I'm going to hand it over to Ebby after I told you about the disaster at Penn Station many years ago. I think it was in the 60s. They actually tore it down. So Ebby, I'm going to hand it over to you, bud.
Thank you, Jeremy. So again, Ebby Severi, University Architect at the Office of the Chancellor. So I do want to emphasize our policy stat, which used to be called SUM. There are multiple sections in the policy stat for the CSU that identifies what needs to be permitted and where our responsibility comes from. This is just kind of our general reference that CSU is responsible for enforcement of the California Building Standards Code, and there are actually other sections of the code that we're also responsible for. The CSU building official or the designated campus deputy building official shall issue a written construction authorization, which is the permit for each project, and maintain a record of all those authorizations. Our record, I'll be very quick, the records are unlike other records of the CSU. They don't time out. We have to keep those indefinitely. And then per California Building Code, no building or structure shall be erected, constructed, enlarged, repaired, moved, improved, removed, converted, or demolished without a building permit. This is, there are exceptions, however, and you may ask, what are those exceptions? Next slide, please. So there are, in the building code, it identifies, I believe it's 13 items that are really intended for the structure, and there are additional ones, and I'll go through these. One is that a one-story detached accessory structure no greater than 120 feet doesn't need a permit. The intent of this one, really, why this is there, is it was really intended for residential, and it's kind of came in there. So if you're doing a, like, let's say if you're doing a play or like a storage shed next to the house, that's what this was intended for. But the key is that it's a detached accessory, not an attached accessory. Then oil derricks, there are other regulations that apply to that. And that's why the building code doesn't require a permit from the building code side. There are other permits that you would have to probably go through and get for oil derrick. Retaining walls not supporting a surcharge and not over 4 feet from the bottom of the footing. And water tanks that are supported directly on grade. Sidewalks and driveways no more than 30 inches above grade. And then there is a nuance here. The code, where it identifies the exceptions, doesn't explicitly identify the second part, not part of accessible route there, but there are other portions of the code that reference that section. So you have to actually kind of dig for that one. Painting, papering, tiling, carpeting, cabinets, countertops, or similar work doesn't need a permit. Temporary motion picture, TV, and theater stage sets and scenery. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if you have a stage, that's not the stage to be permitted. And there are actually pretty robust sections in the California Fire Code regarding the stage, as well as in the building code.
So Abby, on that, additionally, it would be any structure around that too, any structure that would hold that TV, like that still needs to be permitted, like the theater needs to be permitted, or the soundstage has to be permitted.
That's correct.
We're just talking about the
temporary. Right. So again, I think the intent of this was that, hey, I have a theater group kind of coming over for the weekend, and they're going to set up for a presentation out in the open field. That's really what it was intended for.
Yeah.
But if they're doing a stage, that stage is gonna trigger a permit, and there's a special permit section associated with that. Some shallow fabricated prefabricated swimming pools, accessories to group R3 occupancy. These are R3 primarily being not residential. These are actually nursing homes and that type of setup. Shade cloth structures for nursery or agricultural purposes, not including service systems. So again, think about the plastic structure that is in a nursery. That's what the intent is over here, not necessarily structures that have steel structures that go up, right. And we see them in campuses for shade structure.
Yeah, like a shade structure over like a play area or picnic tables or something like that. That would actually need a permit.
That would, in fact, need a permit, Jeremy. Thank you for the clarification. And equipment that is accessory to detached one-story and two detached one and two family dwellings. I'm sorry. So again, these are accessory to detached, and these are equipment that we're talking about. Unlike the first part, which was a one-story detached accessory structure. That's the distinction here. There are some, I didn't want to get into the details of it. In R3, there are some window awnings that would require a permit. And we can, if need be, I can get into the details of that. And non-fixed and movable fixtures, cases, racks, counters, and partitions. Actually, not over 5'9". I think there's a I didn't catch that. It's really anything that you go over 5'9". If you have a partition, that's going to need a permit. So as part of the building code, it also gets into what work for electrical is exempt from permits. Now, the picture over here, I think it shows like a kid's circuit board setup. I'm not sure if that would. Yeah, I'm not sure if that would even be a permit or not. Minor repair work, and I'll get into this a little bit more, including the replacement of lamps, of the connection of approved portable electrical equipment to approved permanently installed receptacles. So in short, what this means is that, hey, if you have, if you're replacing, let's say, lamps, not a problem, But if you're actually, and they're especially if they're just plug and play, that's not a permit issue. If we want to get into a little more deep dive with this one, if you're changing out a fixture, like let's say you have a can fixture that you're replacing that, other portions of the building, California's building code will actually trigger sort of a review and a permit. So let's say the California Energy Code may require you to start looking at that lamp that you're replacing, and would it require a permit and the calculations associated with energy code. So be careful with this one. Electrical equipment of the radio and television transmitting stations. There has been a lot of questions, or there were a lot of questions about 2 years ago about this. For some reason, we're doing a lot of work on actually cell phone towers. And the question that I was constantly getting is that, hey, does this exempt us from doing any permits? This exception is only for the equipment associated with that tower. The towers themselves still need to be permitted. So I just put asterisks there to explain that to everyone. And then temporary testing systems are exempted from the electrical work. So notice it doesn't say anything about relocation of outlets. Those aren't technically exempted, and we can discuss that if need be. And Jeremy, I don't know if you want to take questions now or if you want to just kind of keep on going.
Let's keep on going. I've got a big allotment for time at the end. So.
Sure.
Yep.
And for mechanical, love the picture. It looks like a motorcycle to me, but let's see. Steam, hot or chilled water piping within any heating or cooling equipment is exempt. So it doesn't mean that you can have the piping that is associated with the building. You can go ahead and replace those without a permit. It really is within a particular piece of equipment that is talking about. So it's replacement of any part of mechanical that does not alter, is approved, or make it unsafe. Self-contained refrigeration system containing 10 pounds or less of refrigerant. That is also exempt. Portable devices, and there are multiples of these: heating appliances, ventilation equipment, cooling units, evaporative coolers. As long as they're portable, they are not. They don't require a permit. Now, that doesn't mean that you can go ahead and place a portable unit there, and over time, it just becomes a permanent piece of equipment. That is not the intent here. Next slide, please.
Got it.
All right, and then for plumbing, stopping of leaks doesn't require a permit. Clearing of stoppages or repairs of leaks in pipes, valves, or fixtures, and removal and reinstallation of water closets. Permit and inspection is required, and the code is they really wanted to make a distinction here. If it becomes necessary to remove and replace the same with a new in plumbing, or if the repair do involve or require the replacement or rearrangement of valves, pipes, and fixtures. So be mindful of that. Next slide, please. I can continue on with this, Jeremy. So I wanted to just say what CSU, how our plan check and processes work. So we know what needs to get permitted and what is exempt here. Now, basically we have, as part of our policy stat, we have a process of permitting. I won't get into the major capital and minor capital project requirements, but in general, this is a very big picture look at it. We have an internal and an external process for our permits. Our internal process includes there is a building code plan check that we have. that is a stand-in for what the campus deputy building official may approve on his own, or they may rely on that plan check to do their review for them. In fact, basically, they're acting as the building department for them in that case. There is a mechanical systems review and there is a supplemental electrical systems review. Those reviews are not necessarily a code check, but these are intended as more of a, are we doing the right thing for the CSU? And with the budget, as well as with the knowing what the limitations of the proposal are. Seismic safety peer review is also in effect. So some projects may or may not, and let me come back to I'm going to go back to the mechanical. Some projects may not require the mechanical systems review. Same with seismic safety peer review. The seismic safety peer review is in fact there just to verify that is mandated by the trustees that we have a robust seismic safety in our buildings. And the building code, coming back to the very first one, is an all-encompassing review that captures all of these, including the last, which is the CSU Fire Panic Safety Review. Now, that review is actually fairly new to the CSU system. The intent is that we're reviewing the fire and panic safety as well as initial code evaluations. And then we can go ahead and go to our external reviews. Our external reviews are the Office of State Fire Marshal. That's the big one for us. They are, in fact, the authority having jurisdiction for the fire and panic safety. That's a limited scope that they're the authority for. And then we have the Division of State Architect, limited only to the access compliance. They are not, there is some discussion, but technically they are not an authority having jurisdiction, but they are an entity responsible for reviewing our access compliance. Then we may have other entities outside, which may be the local health department. So that becomes really important for our food services. And if you have pools, they're there. And we have a whole plethora of state agencies that may or may not kind of have authority per a project. Now, for JOC projects, typically that plethora of external agencies don't necessarily come into play, but there has been cases where we're too close to a waterfront and we have to deal with basically a coastal commission type agency. So be aware of those. Hopefully, as project managers of the CSU, you understand what is going on your campus and what those agencies are. If not, you can always contact myself and Jack or others at the Office of the Chancellor so that we can assist you in identifying those. Now, what happens once we get both the internal and external approvals, then the campus deputy building official takes all those and issues the overall CSU permit. It's basically, we take all of these approvals and package them up as the CSU permit. Next slide, Jeremy.
So actually, this one's me. So to kind of thank you so much, Ebby, for all the information. So kind of focus it back on JOC, right? Job order contracting. So in the JOC general conditions, it specifically says that the contractor shall secure all permits and licenses required for any operations required under this contract. It clearly states what the contractor is responsible for, but the campus needs to help. The campus needs to be part of this plan too. So it behooves the campus to help the contractor, even though the contractor is required to do it. We need to help each contractor on each project. Kevin?
Yeah, and secure doesn't necessarily always mean procure. It's going to be based on the scope, because a lot of these projects are going to be design, bid, build, and should be design, bid, build, where the campus will likely permit a lot of these projects before they're handed to the contractor. So we do want to make sure that we provide the permit to the contractor when we give them the NTP, or if they're going to be responsible to do the permit, then that is specifically in their scope that, hey, we're not like this, we're going to give you the design, but then we're going to pay you to do the permitting for it. So it depends if this is something that you've already gone through and did the permit, but either way, as the authority having jurisdiction, when we issue them the NTP, we're basically acknowledging that we've permitted the project and you're good to go, or the project does not require a permit and you're good to go. But we should never hand the contractor an NTP with an expectation that they're going to go get the permit, or them being unclear on whether the project requires a permit or not. And Abby, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, or if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, Kevin. I think if there are circumstances that we know that the permit cannot be reached before, for whatever reason, the NTP has to be issued, then I would think, Kevin, please chime in on it. Would it be acceptable for the campus to explicitly identify that as part of the agreement, that the permit is coming, and be very clear about that?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. And I'll chat with Jeremy afterwards if that can be a checkbox in the software to say, like,
yeah, I'm way ahead of you, Kevin. Actually, I asked Gordian to make a checkbox and to put it in their schedule. There's like a schedule of events. I think you guys all know in JOC where it goes from initial job walk to closeout. But I would like that, and Gordian knows I've already asked him for it. So
basically something that's very clear that says permit required or permit not required.
Checkbox. Yep.
And we could hold the contractor accountable if some reason they jumped the gun. Because on our normal construction projects, we give them the contract NTP and then we give them the construction NTP, which means we've verified that all the peer reviews and plan check is in place. But again, since JOC does a mixture of work, it kind of depends. So it's on us to figure those things out before we allow the contractor to mobilize.
For sure. Kevin, thanks for that. Ebby, thanks again for contributing on that one. We're going to hand it over to our good buddy, Mike Major, Office of Fire Safety. Mike, are you there?
I'm here, everyone. How's everybody doing?
Morning, Mike.
Morning.
Hey, I really appreciate this. This is really great. The information that Ebby and you are giving is invaluable. And I just wanted to thank you both for doing this. This is great. So as you guys heard, they've already been discussing what is allowed and what is not allowed and what requires a permit. It's really important. If you don't know, our office is new and we're trying to take over the authority for approving plans and eventually approving permits altogether. And if we start doing work without a permit, or if we get into those situations, we're not showing the state that we're being good stewards of the law. And we want to show the state fire marshal that we are, so that they relinquish those responsibilities to us. So again, I really appreciate this opportunity.
Of course. And
so,
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
No. Please go ahead, Jeremy.
So up on the screen, you'll see the CPDC bulletin that came out about 2 years ago from Jim Hoffman, talking about, everybody knows, the Wendy Collins memo. The entire thing's not here, but you can find it on the CPDC website. Just go to references and search 20-005 to really get a deeper understanding of what's expected of the Office of State Fire Marshal.
Yes, perfect. That was the next bullet point, and thank you, Jeremy, for saying that. And if you ever have any questions on this bulletin or the Wendy Collins memo, as we call it the Wendy Collins memo only because Chief Wendy Collins was the author of that memo, and it very specifically states some situations that require a permit and don't require a permit. So please put that memo in your back pocket so that you have all the information for that.
Sure.
Next slide, Jeremy.
Yep, Abby, you got your hand raised?
I do. Mike, if I may just kind of clarify, going back one slide with regards to the Wendy Collins memo. It does talk about work that is not required by a permit, but that's the Office of State Fire Marshal's permit that they're talking about. So there is work that is identified there that they don't need a permit, but CSU still needs a permit for it. I want to make sure that everybody's clear.
Right.
It is that bulletin is really coming from the perspective of the fire and panic safety and what the authority of Office of State Fire Marshal is.
Perfect.
Great point, Ebby. Great point.
Excellent.
Yeah, that what Ebby said is absolutely true. Of course, the State Fire Marshal, their concerns and their permits are really based off of, like Ebby said, fire and life safety, or what they call fire and panic safety, as the Health and Safety Code puts it. And so, earlier you heard Ebby talking about how the State Fire Marshal's office is a very specific, for the lack of a better word, niche in the code of what they're interested in looking at and what they want to enforce and give a permit for, whereas the deputy building official has a much larger range of items that they'll be issuing a permit for. So go ahead, next slide, Jeremy, just real quick. So I wanted to throw this phone number. This is our main phone number to our office. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to call us, leave a message, or you can always email me. I'm at mmajor@calstate.edu. Please ask us to clarify anything. There's a new bulletin out requiring that gives guidance on the same website that Jeremy mentioned, that talks about concurrence and what needs to be reviewed at the same time as the third-party reviewers, and when you need to submit plans to the Office of Fire Safety prior to submitting to the Office of the State Fire Marshal. And that's very important. We have a major minor cap cutoff for what is required. However, our office is always open to review minor caps and do any kind of code consulting before you have to deal with the State Fire Marshal's office. So again, as this slide says, make sure you have our Office of Fire Safety approval prior to submitting. And what we'll do is we'll be sending you a formal letter after our review. Our review times have been shown to be not very impactful to the overall schedule. That seems to be one big worry when it comes to the schedule. Our first review is 15 working days, and after that it's 5 working day turnarounds, and 99% of the time meeting that schedule. So if that's a concern about schedules, we can discuss that further. So I think that's my last slide, Jeremy. I think I only had two slides.
Yeah, Mike. Thank you so much for being part of this. We appreciate Office of Fire Safety being on the call and really talking about the importance of Office of State Fire Marshal review. And again, much like Ebby said, it's really two separate baskets, right? So you might have a project that has to have a permit through your building official that doesn't even touch Office of State Fire Marshal at all. You might not even need one.
That's true.
Or you might need one, but always ask. What was the call before you dig? Call before you start your project. And we would
811, right?
Yep. Except Mike just gave you the number. Call him. You guys, we're going to do a quick questions and answers, and then I'm going to hand it over to Kevin. He's got a fun quiz for us to take before we finish off today. So we got good questions coming in. Anybody got questions about what we talked about today?
I've got one question. This is more in regards to a self-contained mobile cell phone tower. If it's 100% self-contained, would that require a permit?
Mobile cell phone tower. So we're talking about the ones that kind of have the
Has a
kickers.
crank up mast on it with the antennas on it and outriggers that stabilize it. So there's no anchoring.
Right. More than likely, no. There may be circumstances that you may need to. If you have to anchor it, then I would have to take a look at that.
Yes, and if I have to tap power, then I would say yes.
Right. And however, you may want to just kind of double check, even if it is a self-contained unit. One thing that I would ask that entity is that, well, for up to what mileage of wind is that rated for?
Mhm.
Right. And then verify that with your area.
This territory is 80 mile an hour, I believe. So
Yeah,
I would want to have the calcs on record that it can handle that.
that's correct.
Great. Got a question here. What size project needs DSA accessibility review? DCBO would have experience to evaluate clearances and paths of travel.
So I'll answer that one. So don't tell anyone this, but so
there's only 50
Division
people
of State Architect. I'll give you a kind of a medium answer here. Division of State Architect, they rely on certain portion of the California law with regards to their authority. Now, they're not an authority having jurisdiction. They are a responsible agency for our review. The language that they rely on has been cobbled together from when they used to be the authority having jurisdiction for CSU. But that authority basically got moved from them to us as government code 66606, I want to say, gave it to us. Some of the language of the old is still there. So they're going to say everything needs to come to the Division of State Architect. Now, back in 2017, there was a CSU executive order 11, I want to say 1111, that clarified that hey, any projects that are under the minor capital project value threshold, the campus deputy building official may review those under their authority and responsibility and their experience. So technically, CSU is saying, hey, we don't need to go to DSA for those projects. I do say, do not abuse that executive order 1111. The reason is that we want to use it sparingly, not necessarily just kind of say to DSA, no, we're gonna, stick our thumb at you and say, no, we're not coming to you anymore. We want to use that sparingly in case we get challenged, and we don't want to lose that flexibility that we have.
Now, I assume the campus retained CASP could be utilized by the deputy building official?
Possibly. I do want to say that CASP there, and I'm a CASP, you're a CASP, Kevin, and I think there are quite a few CASPs on this call. Not all CASPs are well informed, because the CASP program is really intended as an inspection process. So if you have a CASP or access to a CASP that can review, you certainly can utilize that. But it's really still the campus deputy building official's responsibility to issue the permit. And also, there is nothing that prevents you from sending the project to the third-party plan check, because they are also reviewing for accessibility. So you have multiple resources that you can rely on for accessibility.
Awesome. Ebby, thanks for fielding that one.
Last quick one on that. One of our most common audit findings that shows up on almost every project, which the requirement includes minor cap projects, is one of our it's not accessibility policy, but I guess inclusion policies where projects should be passed through the campus accessibility and disability like coordinator department, which isn't always in facilities, so that they have an opportunity just to review the impacts on their accessibility program. So unless that accessibility disability department is within facilities and is already part of the loop, we are getting that picked up on audit a lot, which if it led to a lawsuit or an incident, that's a kind of a necessary step that most projects are skipping. So you guys, I think all campuses have to have an accessibility department. So make sure to utilize them and make them aware of any projects that may have an impact. So they have an opportunity to provide feedback, which they can probably pick up things that impact programmatic accessibility that aren't obvious to us while we're looking at the built environment. So just something to be on the lookout for. And that's inclusive of JOC, minor cap, major cap, anything that might impact the built environment or the program. And that's tricky.
Awesome.
Great point, Kevin. I do want to clarify also one additional thing, which I learned through a campus. Each campus, there is a person that is assigned, and they're legally, each campus is supposed to have one. There is a accessibility or ADA coordinator at every campus. They're really acting as the ADA manager to kind of have all the stakeholders come together. And that's not necessarily your disability student services or whatever that system is called at your campus. So be mindful of that to make sure that they're also pulled into discussions. Jill, I missed the small furniture projects. I think you're more than fine as long as somebody is taking a look at those small furniture projects and the placement of those, if you want to utilize the executive 1111 powers there.
Awesome. Thanks for covering that last question there, Ebby. Any more questions, guys?
I have a question regarding going back to the fire marshal submissions of, so what iteration of plans can we submit to the fire safety office for CSU before, because you get too far down the road and you may miss something and it gets baked into the plans and you're backtracking way back. I mean, obviously you don't want to set the initial plans back, but once you get to, do you have to have 100% plans? What's the cutoff on that?
Do you want me to take that one, Jeremy?
Yeah, please, Mike. Thank you.
That's a great question, and I wish I would have mentioned it. So the next time I'll make sure that's in my repertoire. When you pull up that memo that I was discussing that's on the hub, you'll see that you're going to have an opportunity to submit at SD and PD as well as CD. And you're absolutely right. We want to be in during the feasibility study and any sort of planning, just to be in right at the beginning, so you don't have to wait till the end. So that was an excellent question.
Yeah, we just don't want to, sometimes if you get way down the road, you get the iteration of plans, it's a biddable set, and then you submit, you may be too late, and then you're backtracking, re-engineering it. So I just wanted to see what the process was.
Yes.
Well, it depends on the size of the building, but just to have that review is, it's important that we do that at the right time. I guess
Exactly.
we have to judgment for that as well. So,
Mike, may I ask you a follow-up question to that?
What we like to do with that is make sure that we're in right at the beginning, so that if the campus or the architect is falling in love with a specific design that we can foresee future problems with, we can stop it at the feasibility and SD stage instead of getting all the way to the CD stage. So,
or
I'm sorry.
EJs too. You start talking about a designer kind of going over the limit on engineering justifications, and then you're going to take that to the Office of State Fire Marshal and expect them to approve it. That's a slippery slope as well.
Yeah, I interrupted Ebby. I'm sorry, Ebby.
Sorry,
Go
Ebby.
ahead.
Oh, no. I had a question for you, Mike, related to that. I think that process is well established for major capital projects, which are large. I'm wondering, at what stage do you want to see, does the Office of Fire Safety wants to see smaller projects that may be just basically, a tenant improvement in a suite where there is really, the design is fairly quick and nimble and is very fast paced. There may not be an opportunity for a the pre-design review, and your office may only get one chance before it's submitted to you for official review. When do you think that would be appropriate?
Yeah, that's a great question too. Wow, you guys got great questions. So when it's quick and nimble, or if it's smaller than a major cap, we put the code consulting hat on instead of the official plan review submittal. And what we'll do in those situations is we'll work with our schedule, the designer's schedule, or the design team schedule, and try to get in there as soon as we can to do the best quick and dirty, for the lack of a better term, review to try to help the design team get to where they need to be in order to get their plans through the state fire marshal's office. So we'll rearrange some things on our end just to make sure we've been trying to really accommodate. Now, what we're finding out, Ebby, is because we're a new office and we don't have the staffing that we need. More and more campuses are coming to us for those quick and fast-moving pace code consultations, and we're noticing that it's impacting our schedule as well. So we're trying to get our staffing to meet those needs. But yeah, I think I answered your question. If it's not a formal plan review process, can we just get in there and take an overview and a look? Yes, we can. And can we do that for minor cap? Yes, we can. Yes to both those things.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to add on to that. Both Jack Anderson and myself, we have campus assignments. So we also provide that service along with the Office of Fire Safety to make, if you do desire to make a quick review with regards to scoping, we're not taking over as the third-party plan check, but it's just more of a courtesy, what our thoughts are, what our your stumbling blocks are, if you do desire and want to reach out to us.
Perfect. Is there a format you guys want to be submitted for the plans? Or it doesn't have to be a hard copy. I'm assuming it has to be some digital, is that CAD, whatever?
Well, for the Office of Fire Safety, on the hub, we have an online portal, and you have two options. We will entertain paper copies. We haven't seen that yet. It seems like most everyone has gone to electronic. So on our online portal, we give two options. You can upload PDFs directly onto your application, or you can input a link to your corporate, let's say Dropbox or whatever you have where you store all of your drawings, so we can grab them and then we can review them electronically. And what we do is, in our format, is we not only put comments on the plans, but we also have a running list of comments that can be reviewed by the design team.
Awesome. Mike, thank you so much for that. Guys, we're going to take a quick look here at the upcoming training opportunities that we have at CPDC. Coming up on May 4th, we've got Insurance and Bonds Overview. Coming up on May 18th, Project Management 101. We also have Collaborative Design Build 101 and 102. I left the link right there. I'll put it in the chat here in a second, where you can register for all these training sessions. not only from the construction management unit, but there's a lot of other great training resources that you can use. And if you want on your campus, Gordian and myself can show up for a JOC deep dive training to help your project managers use Gordian and JOC even better. So right now I'm going to hand it over to Kevin, and he's going to have a little quiz for us. Kevin?
Yes. Let me find the right presentation and where it's hiding. Actually, as a predecessor to the quiz, so you guys aren't just kind of left hanging, I did want to tack this in because it's the most common misconception is that if something's construction, it requires a permit, or if it requires a permit, it's construction, and if it's maintenance, it's not. So they're not completely mutually exclusive. Some maintenance might require a permit, and some construction might not require a permit. You have to look at the triggers of these separately. So likely, if something's construction, you should definitely review if it needs a permit or not. But just because something is maintenance might not necessarily mean it doesn't need a permit. But this is a good time with this group of people here to kind of talk about one of the primary triggers that'll help you determine public works or construction versus maintenance, which also typically triggers prevailing wage. And again, prevailing wage triggers. Sometimes it depends, and it's not always. Maintenance doesn't have, well, I guess that's the number one as well, is maintenance is prevailing wage. So anything that's maintenance or construction is prevailing wage in the definition. That's a separate topic. But generally, construction is erection, construction, alteration, painting, repair, or improvement. So one of the key things here is repair and improvement, which also includes basically affixing or fastening anything to real property. So those of us who spoke to me know that I'm always as conservative as possible to make things as flexible as possible. So I don't just take the most conservative or I'm the most flexible, so I don't always take the conservative approach, but I do the research. I've looked at multiple case studies and read through almost all the DIR determinations to kind of see if this was questions or when it has been questioned, where specific projects fall. So I've looked at, dozens on camera installations, audio video installations, TV mounting, that kind of stuff to see where the interpretations have fell. And I think LAX lost a lawsuit because they were installing security cameras and they didn't pay prevailing wage because they said it wasn't construction. Several colleges have lost lawsuits because they installed audio video devices that were fixed, like a projector screen, in-wall audio video. So things that are installed or fastened or fixed. So if you're using a tool to fix something together, that almost always triggers construction. And Jeremy just stole the screen from me. I'll steal it back. So that's the one I always go back to is, are you affixing or fastening anything to real property? So there's another one that was kind of interesting. I think LA Metro, and there was a lawsuit. They were doing improvements on rail cars, and the court came back and said, well, a rail car, since it's a moving thing, it's not fixed to real property. That in that scenario didn't trigger prevailing wage. But if you take a trailer and turn it into like a permanent building, it becomes part of the real property. So modular buildings, mobile buildings, if they're going to be basically anchored and stairs put up to them, those all turn into something that's fixed to real property. So that's what I always try to use. And that makes it as clear as possible. But again, there's always a lot of gray area. But if you're repairing something that broke, so if there's a pump that broke and it wasn't maintained, so it broke because it wasn't maintained, then it's construction. If you're replacing seals or re-greasing a pump or replacing filters in an air handler before the motor blows up, then that's maintenance. But if you're going in and repairing something after it broke, it's construction. And again, some of these will be different than what's required for a permit. But here we go through each of these, and I'll get Ebby's help on the permit interpretation. But kind of, if anybody wants to just shout out or throw in the chat. So this first one is modular furniture. So is the installation of modular furniture, one, does it require a permit? And two, is it maintenance or construction? And it does have power and data.
Then yes.
Oh, it
Permit
doesn't need
required.
a permit. Only DSA, only ADA evaluation.
So it should be yes to both. If it's a new modular, so the construction trigger for furniture is if it's a modular type system that needs really assembly of a system. So if it's a standing desk that has a panel on the front of it, that could be questioned as a system, whereas something like a table, like this guy over here, even though you're putting like legs on it, that doesn't necessarily trigger prevailing wage or construction. So that one's kind of tricky. But then if you're anchoring a table for seismic reasons or ADA, so it doesn't move around, you're fastening it to the real property, and then it is construction. And depending on where this furniture and table goes and the size and weight of it, it may require a permit as well, because it might have an impact on the egress. So this guy up here, so this is AV equipment. So as I mentioned, AV equipment, that would be construction. And depending on the work, would require a permit. Installation is something as simple as a microwave. If you order these from like even Home Depot, they'll even trigger and say, hey, you need a city permit to install this unless you install it yourself as a home installer. But if you have them install it, they have to pull a permit because it's being fastened. If you slide a microwave on top of a counter and plug it in, then that's not construction. Fastening stuff like TVs to real property, that's construction. Hardware is construction. Cameras construction. And then the refrigerators, it depends. A regular refrigerator typically is not construction, but a refrigerator with an ice or water dispenser that requires that attachment to the MEP system, which will usually have like a vacuum breaker or something like that, potentially, or just an attachment aside from plugging something in, is construction. So kind of any questions on if I made it more gray, or does that more clearly draw the line? If you fix or fasten something, it's typically construction and will require prevailing wage.
Can I make a comment, Kevin? Because I think there are probably a lot of people here that are saying, what do you mean I need a permit for my refrigerator, for the ice maker and the water? How CSU gets around a lot of the minor permits is by issuing annual permits. So talk to your campus deputy building official. These annual permits allow you to work, basically pool one permit for the entirety of that year for that type of work. If you don't have that, please feel free to contact us. We're trying to pull annual permits, the best ones from several campuses, and we'll provide you with examples and turn those into a boilerplate if you don't have them. I do say that use your judgment, and let's make sure that we don't get into a situation like LAX was getting into with regards to what needed a permit and what didn't.
And labor has been more and more aggressive, as a lot of you guys have seen. So we've been seeing more challenges, and we expect to see more challenges from labor. And they won't necessarily balk at it at first, because some of them are, I guess, just negative, kind of attacking the system. But they'll do the work, and then they'll submit and say, "Hey, I was supposed to be paid prevailing wage," and then there's penalties and back pay and all the other things associated with that. So to protect CSU, it's good if you're not clear, if something needs to be construction or prevailing wage, feel free to reach out, and we can help clarify. And then for the ones that's really gray, we have a consultant that we can contact. And I guess an example of a gray one that I'll hit real quick is tree removal. Tree removal currently can be both maintenance or construction, depending on the impetus of the removal. So kind of why it's being removed and also the reason. And one of the reasons that's changed recently is that removal of trees wasn't considered a normal reoccurring activity. It was kind of a one-time because there was a fire. But one of the most recent DIR interpretations said because fires are so prevalent that it is routine, and it could be considered maintenance in those considerations. So especially if you're doing tree removal, reach out and we can look at the most recent DIR interpretations to see what the reason for it is and what that falls into, or be conservative and do it as public works, because most of our recent tree removal projects we have deemed to be public works based on recent interpretations.
I was led to believe for a long time that there's a dollar threshold too. If you're below like $2,500, you can kind of skirt a lot of the prevailing wage stuff. Once you get past the threshold, it is automatically
1,000.
1,000. Yeah, it's pretty low.
$1,000. Yeah. So anything less than.
So that's what we consider. He goes like, you have a small hang a TV.
Yeah.
Okay. It's kind of that's.
Yeah, and don't.
A default that we can kind of use for the decision though how to proceed on that.
Yeah, and lots of entities have gotten in trouble for splitting projects. So they're like, well, I'm going to do tree removal, but I'm going to issue 25 POs so that each tree is less than $1,000. Yeah, don't try not to do that. If it's something that's done together at the same time with the same workload, and you get caught artificially chopping it up, that's more willful type violations, and they can be more aggressive with the penalties. So just be careful and reach out if you guys have any questions.